Hey, look, I've been working too hard, and I'm out. We got really, we got. Oh.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the 8th Street Sunday School noon hour, provided for our teens and young adults that are away in college. Today's lesson, it says Jacob sets up a sacred pillar. This lesson deals with the story of Jacob and Esau. And the introduction is this. A ritual is a sequence of activities involving gestures, words, actions, rewards, or objects. Most of us probably engage in some personalized ritual daily, like following a self-prescribed order of preparing for the day, beginning a task, or celebrating a special occasion. Rituals are significant for humanity because they help bring a sense of structure and meaning to our lives, psychologically, socially, culturally, and spiritually. For example, group rituals like family reunions help foster connectivity, thus producing a sense of belonging and preserving meaningful family traditions. Engaging in cultural rituals handed down from one generation to another helps maintain cultural identities, heritages, and connections to a group's ethnic roots. Rituals also provide an avenue for spiritual growth when spiritual disciplines like prayer, solitude, and reflection and meditation becomes daily practices. Finally, rituals are significant because they often mark important events, a change in direction, or some transforming life experience. An example of this purpose during the patriarchal period in Genesis is Jacob's response to God's reaffirmation of the Abrahamic covenant. God spoke to Jacob during a dream when Isaac sent him away after wrongfully receiving his blessing. Jacob marked his life change the morning after this encounter with God by performing a memorializing ritual. Jacob took the stone he used as a pillow and anointed it with oil, symbolizing consecrating himself and the site to God. So this week's lessons aims are to discern God's interaction with Jacob during his life's journey, experience inexplicable joy in God's presence, and celebrate your God encounters in praise and worship. And I like to, if I can, for a moment, talk for a second about let me be me. In John 16, verse 12, let's take a quick glance at it and see what it can help, how it can help us with this story. John 16 and 12. 16. It reads, I have yet many things to say unto you, but ye cannot bear them right now. And I say that to say this. Have you ever been, or have you ever found yourself in a place where everybody that was there wanted you to be like everybody that was there and not yourself? You gave them what they needed, but not what they wanted. They wanted you to conform. And if you look at this lesson today, it has a lot to do with transformation of Jacob from a trickster, a slick guy, a person on a personal mission to destroy his brother and rob him of his birthright. Let me read the story. After Abraham died, his son Isaac lived in the land of Canaan. Like his father, Isaac had his home in a tent. Around him were the tents of his people and many flocks of sheep and herds of cattle, feeding wherever they could find grass to eat and water to drink. Isaac and his wife Rebekah had 2 children. The older was named Esau, the younger Jacob. Esau was a man of the woods and very fond of hunting, and he was rough and covered with hair. Jacob was quiet and thoughtful, staying at home, dwelling in the tent, and caring for the flocks of his fathers. Isaac loved Esau more than Jacob because Esau brought to his father that which he had killed in his hunting. But Rebekah liked Jacob because she saw that he was wise and careful in his work. Among the people in those lands, when a man dies, his older son receives twice as much as the younger of what his father has owned. This was called his birthright, for it was his right as the oldest born. So Esau, as the older, had a birthright to more than Isaac's possessions than Jacob. And besides this, there was a privilege of the promise of God that the family of Isaac should receive great blessings. The sale of the birthright. Now Esau, when he grew up, did not care for his birthright, for the blessing which God had promised. But Jacob, who was a wise man, wished greatly to have the birthright which would come to Esau when the father died. Once, when Esau came home, hungry and tired from hunting in the fields, he saw that Jacob had a bowl of something that he had just cooked for dinner. And Esau said, "Give me some of that red stuff in the dish. Will you not give me some? I'm hungry." And Jacob answered, "I will give it to you if you will first of all sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "What is the use of a birthright to me now when I am almost starving to death? You can have my birthright if you will give me something to eat." Then Esau made Jacob a solemn promise to give to Jacob his birthright, all for a bowl of food. It was not right for Jacob to deal so selfishly with his brother, but it was very wrong in Esau to care so little about the birthright and God's blessings. So let us dig into this lesson. Verses 12 through 15 reads as thus. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land of which you are laying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Genesis 28 introduces the second phase of Jacob's life and an extraordinary demonstration of God's grace. His unmerited favor toward him. After leaving home and traveling throughout the day, Jacob stopped for the night, secured a stone for a pillow, lay down to sleep, and experienced his first encounter with God during a dream. In this dream, Jacob saw a ladder or stairway extending between the earth and heaven, and angels ascending and descending upon it. As God was standing at the top of the stairway, he introduced himself as the God of Abraham and Isaac, and confirmed the blessings Isaac bestowed on Jacob and the promises of the Abrahamic covenant. Then, until these promises were fulfilled, Jacob's gracious vision or encounter with God provides significant practical application for believers. First, this unexpected encounter challenges us to be aware of God's omniscience and omniscience presence, thus encouraging us to trust his plan for our lives. Despite Jacob's unawareness or lack of understanding of God's plan for him, God was faithful to his promise and showed up to ensure their fulfillment in his life. Jacob's encounter is also a testimony of God's multi-generational faithfulness to those he chooses to use to accomplish his will. Second, God promised to be with Jacob from this point onward as the protector and provider wherever Jacob was. Consequently, knowing that God is all-knowing and everywhere present should encourage and motivate us to persevere through adversity and unexpected life changes, and with the unawareness that he is always available and accessible to guide, provide, and protect us when we stay in his will. Finally, we are challenged to strive obediently to demonstrate our trust in God as examples for the generations to follow. Two things I want to point out first is Jacob was struggling. Like you said, this is the second encounter, but Jacob struggled as a young person. Jacob literally had to fear God, and through the fear was transformed in order to get his blessings from God. You remember the story. Jacob laid in a cave, hunted by his brother Esau. And in that cave is when he experienced the thorn in his side, or some say side, some say hip. But he wrestled with God that night and would not let God go or stop wrestling with him until God promised him something. So on this very night in the cave, Jacob's fear is what propelled them into transformation. Now, some of the things that we must know, Jacob's journey chronicled in the Bible is a compelling narrative of transformation, something that shows how faith and personal growth intertwine. His life provides a blueprint for spiritual self-improvement, demonstrating the potential for change and renewal. Jacob, known initially for his deceit and manipulation, undergoes a profound transformation. His initial image as a trickster evolved into that of a man who wrestles with God, is renamed Israel, which translates to one who struggles with God. This momentous encounter marks a significant turning point in Jacob's life. Jacob's wrestling with God mirrors our own internal wrestles, our struggles with self-doubt, fear, and faith. In this context, the wrestling symbolized Jacob's struggle to surrender his will to God's plan. It represents our internal battles to let go of our plans and submit to our divine guidance. Transformation is a process. I talked to our young people this morning and talked about that of a butterfly. A butterfly just don't become a worm one day and then a butterfly the next. He goes through a process of molting and meltdowns before he becomes this beautiful butterfly. So one of the things we must know in transformation, we must go through a process. Wrestling with God leads to spiritual growth. Jacob's wrestling match with God is arguably one of the most iconic moments in his story. It marks a pivotal point in Jacob's transformation where he confronts his past, his actions, and his identity. Note that the wrestling is this context signifies a deep internal struggle, an intense soul searching that culminates in a profound spiritual awakening. In this wrestling match, Jacob does not let go until he receives a blessing. Despite his hip being dislocated, he perseveres. That's a lesson for us right there. Just because you're hurting or may seem down and out, push on. Don't give up, because God won't give up on you. This resilience and determination symbolizes the tenacity required in our personal journeys of faith and growth. Just as Jacob wrestled with God, we too must grapple with spiritual struggles. These struggles might involve questioning our beliefs, confronting our past mistakes, or dealing with personal shortcomings. And just like Jacob, it's tough to go through what we must go through in order to grow spiritually. Let's look on at verses 16 through 21. Verses 16 through 21 says, when Jacob awoke from this sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to call it Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey, I am taken and will give my food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household. Then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And for of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. Jacob's initial response upon awakening was fear and surprise. Affirming his not having developed a relationship with Abraham and Isaac's God, Jacob voiced his unawareness that God was in this place. Consequently, Jacob declared this place awesome and named it Bethel, meaning the house of God and the gateway to heaven. Designating this site as the gate to heaven signified Jacob's recognition of God's presence, thus reminding us that God is not confined by time and space, but is everywhere at all times. Often believers fail to grasp that God is present wherever a sacred space has been declared or dedicated to him and should be reverenced and respected. Jacob arose early the following day and commemorated the sacredness of this place by taking his stone headrest, erecting it as a pillar, pouring oil on its top as a memorial and act of reverence, and renaming the place previously called Luz, Bethel. After memorializing this sacred place, or space, Jacob acknowledged the unconditional blessing God bestowed on him by making a vow. He declared that if God promised to do all these things for him, he would affirm his faith in him, designate Bethel as a sacred meeting place, and gift God with a tenth of all God gave him. Jacob's vow was, was his mark, acknowledging God's faithfulness and commitment to serve God faithfully and live according to his will. Jacob would return to this site in the future, and centuries later, it would play a significant role in his descendants' spiritual lives. Jacob's response to this life-changing encounter provides an example for believers. The assurance of God's presence should motivate every believer to respond by dedicating themselves in sacred spaces devoted to worshiping him in gratitude for his grace, striving to remain in his will, offering him proportionate financial gifts, and committing to serve him faithfully and obediently because of his faithfulness. And as we look at Jacob's commitments to Christ, we have to remember change often comes from facing our fears. Before Jacob wrestled with God, he was preparing to face his estranged brother Esau. Jacob was deeply afraid, haunted by the guilt of his past deceit. Yet it was this context of fear that Jacob encountered God and experienced transformation. Let's admit it. We often perceive fear as an obstacle, something to avoid. However, Jacob's story encourages us to view fear differently. Instead of preventing growth, fear can actually crystallize it. It's when we are willing to face our fears that we can truly begin to transform. In Jacob's case, it was the fear of facing the past and the possibility of Esau's revenge that led him to seek God's blessing. In the act of wrestling with God, Jacob confronted his fear and emerged transformed. This lesson is as relevant today as it was during Jacob's time. We all have fears and insecurities that hold us back. However, if we confront these fears like Jacob did, I'm sure we can experience tremendous growth and deepen our faith. One of the things we must remember in this process of transformation is reconciliation. Have you ever pondered on the power of reconciliation in our journey to personal growth and building faith? As I mentioned, after the wrestling match with God, Jacob reconciled with his brother Esau. Despite his fear, he chose to face the past actions and sought forgiveness. Jacob's reconciliation with Esau was a significant part of his transformation. It was the moment he acknowledged his mistakes, asked for forgiveness, and made peace with his past. The act of reconciliation allowed him to shed his guilt and move forward in his spiritual journey. It requires humility, courage, and acknowledgement of our wrongdoings, qualities that contribute to character development and spiritual maturity. Reconciliation, therefore, is not just about mending relationships, it's about personal transformation and spiritual growth. One insightful note: the act of reconciliation is considered a crucial step towards healing and spiritual growth in many religious teachings. Now, the other thing I could say, reconciliation brings personal growth. Personal growth involves a change in identity. In Jacob's story, transformation was not just about changing actions or attitudes, it involved a change of identity. After wrestling with God, Jacob was given a new name, Israel. This new name symbolized his changed character and his new status as someone who struggled with God and overcame. This change of name signifies the deep and profound nature of personal transformation. It's not merely about altering or external actions or behaviors. It encompasses our very identity. Here are some key implications of this. A deep internal change is crucial for authentic personal growth. Personal transformation often involves redefining our self-perception, what we think of ourselves. Our spiritual journey can lead to a new sense of identity. Equally as important, transformation is not about becoming someone different, but about becoming the best version of ourselves. I often mention when I'm talking to young people, there's a you inside of you that you haven't met yet. And that's what this transformation with Jacob was. Jacob was trying to change. Jacob needed to change. And the only way Jacob could change was find that him inside of him that he hadn't met yet. And like Jacob, we can embrace our spiritual journey and allow it to shape us into better individuals. So that's the lesson for this week. I want to say thank you and God bless. And I will see you on next Sunday, Lord's will. To God be the glory.